द वे फॉरवर्ड इज तुहाडा बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। मैं तुहाडा होस्ट हरजोत सिंह। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਹੰਟਿੰਗਟਨ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਟਾਊਨ ਕਾਉਂਸਲ ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਕੈਥਲੀਨ ਕਲੀਅਰੀ ਜੀ ਨਾਲ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਸ਼ੋਅ 'ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਇਨਕਰੇਜ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲੋਕਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਲੋਕਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਬੜਾ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਨ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝੋ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝੋ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਪਿਕ ਕਰੋ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਣ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਣ। ਕੈਥਲੀਨ ਕਲੀਅਰੀ ਜੀ ਲੌਂਗ ਆਈਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਹਨ, Long Island, New York. She was born in Long Island, New York, and we will speak to her today about why she is the best candidate for this election. Kathleen, you're very welcome.
Oh, thank you for letting me come here today and talk to you.
Kathleen, tell us something about yourself. Were you born on the island?
Yes, so I was born in Massapequa. Where I grew up with two younger brothers, and then I've been living in East Northport for the past 21 years with my husband Brian and our daughter Kate.
And did you go to school in Long Island?
I did. I went to school, the first 2 years I actually went still on Long Island but in Queens. I went to St. John's University for 2 years, and then I ended up graduating with a business degree from Adelphi University in Garden City.
Kathleen, tell us something about your work experience that makes you the most viable candidate for this position in Long Island.
Okay, so first off, I have 25 years contract management experience. So I've worked for companies in such as Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, in the financial services industry. And then I've also worked for Department of Defense contractors and Accenture, which is a consulting company. So with contract management, your responsibility for making sure that your contracts are operating within the certain parameters, hitting targets, hitting their budget, and not doing any overruns. What you eventually want is to be able for the company to be making the money that they intended to when they were entered into this contract, and that the client is satisfied and is getting everything that they intended to when they decided to either purchase your services or product.
So we understand you have the experience with the budgets that we need in this council.
Yes. Yes, and also I want to bring up one other thing. So I did that for 25 years, and then I decided to make a career switch and went back to school at SUNY Farmingdale for horticulture. So I spent a few years getting my degree there, and what I did after graduating was I worked for an interior horticulture and then went over and moved over to state parks. So I worked at Bayard Cutting Arboretum, which is on the south shore of Long Island. It's a beautiful state park. Everyone should visit it. I like to put that plug in. And my responsibility was to manage the native planting there. There's a newly developed, renovated area that we have all native plants, so we'll be able to show the community how you can grow these beautiful plants that don't require a lot of as much care as like maybe an exotic plant. They don't need as much watering, and they can adapt to a lot of our flooding issues. And since this is on the South Shore, they can deal with a lot of like the salt air, salt breeze and such. So it's very good. It's not only is it beautiful, but it's really educational to the public. Another thing that I did there was I was responsible for applying for and managing grants from the Department of Environmental Conservation. There was a large part of the park called Paradise, and it was decimated by southern pine beetle. It was unsafe for the public to be able to go into that part of the park because many of the pathways had dead or dying trees. So there I was also responsible for redesigning areas of the garden that had to do with flooding issues. Because as we know on Long Island, we've been seeing that flooding has changed since Hurricane Sandy. A lot of areas that never used to flood are flooding, and others that had flooded before are getting even more flooding. So having this environmental background plus the business experience, I think, is a really good, an excellent skill set for Huntington. We have a lot of coastline in the township of Huntington, and we know as a government we have a lot of money that we're spending on behalf of the residents, and we should be making sure that that money is being spent properly and efficiently.
Have you run for public office before?
I did. I ran for public office for the first time last year. I ran for New York State Senate against Senator John Flanagan, who at the time was the Senate Majority Leader. I made the decision to run based on the fact that Senator Flanagan, I felt and still believe, was not really taking into consideration the residents' issues. He was dealing mostly with people that were giving him money that were outside of the community. And I mean, you can look at the fundraising and see where he was getting most of his campaign donations. But there were a lot of things. As Senate Majority Leader, he was holding up a lot of votes from not being brought onto the Senate floor in New York State. And since we have flipped, all of us have flipped the New York State Senate over to Democrats, a lot of those things have passed, such as the red flag laws. There's been some changes to voting reforms, which this year we have early voting. And you'll also be able to make some changes to your registration status and just a lot of things that people were really anxious about. The another one that was very important to people that I heard at the door was the Child Victims Act, which would allow people who had been, currently adults, who had been abused as a child, sexually abused as a child, to bring up a case against their abuser and not have to be shut out by statute of limitations. What was happening before was people were only up to the age of 23, and if they didn't bring their case by then they were out of luck.
Wow. So do you now or previously held any government positions?
No, I have not.
And do you belong to any service or community organizations in Long Island?
Yes, I do. So I belong to the League of Women Voters of Huntington. So what we've been doing there is we make sure that people are registered to vote. It's a fantastic organization, and they're non-political. So since I've decided the 2 times that I've been running, I've stepped back from my advocacy with them, but they are a great organization, and they really provide a lot of service to the community and a lot of education to issues. And I find that anyone has any, concerns or questions about things that they want to know on certain levels, League of Women Voters is an excellent website to go to because they will really dive deep into that. And another area, apart from working with my daughter, I was her track coach. I also helped her with doing some Girl Scouts, when she was little, all of those, fun things, and soccer coaching. Now that she's in high school, she doesn't need me to be her coach. But I have also, currently I'm on the board of the Long Island Native Plant Initiative. So what we're doing there is making sure that we are growing plants that are actually native to Long Island, and that we're hoping to be able to grow enough that we can have them be sold commercially and they can be put into restoration projects.
With all the things that you have done, I think this question is already answered, but I would still like you to tell us what's your inspiration for running for this office right now.
Sorry if I missed that question. So the reason that I decided to run for this office is that once I started looking about what has been happening in the last few years of our town, is that the concentration is, again, similar to what was happening last year when I ran at the state level. The similar problems here on the town level is that things are being done for the people who are connected and have been involved in maybe certain politics, and they're being taken care of. Their friends are being brought in. We're not seem to be hiring the best qualified people to run departments. The people that are being hired to run departments are people who have run for other races and have lost. So now they're being compensated to be paying 6-figure salaries to be running departments. Also, what we have is not an inclusive feeling in the town. For example, we have issues with people have problems, with parking and with zoning, and instead of bringing people together and asking what all their opinions are. And these are the things that I have felt before I decided to run, but has been enforced by what I'm hearing at the doors, because I've been canvassing and I've knocked on over 2,500 doors. So when I'm talking to people, they're saying the same thing. They don't know what is happening in the town, and they don't have a sense that the government is working for them, that it's working for others. There have been institutions, new fees have been instituted, such as a mooring fee for boaters. That wasn't something that was done in the past. There's a double and tripling of fees for fairs. The East Northport Chamber of Commerce has had to pay more money to host the East Northport Fair and similar fairs in Huntington. So fees are being raised. We're not getting any more services, and we're also not being asked to be included in any of the decision making in order of the decisions that the town government is making.
See, we always believe the repository of democracy in any society is the local government.
Yes.
And if local government is not listening to us, then that's a difficult situation, right? You have some background with unions. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So I was lucky to grow up as my father having been in the union, so he was in CSEA. He worked for New York State Telephone and then AT&T. So I was lucky in knowing, like, having great insurance as a child and dental, and then my father had a very good, well-paying job. And then my husband is a New York City retired firefighter, and while he was a firefighter, he was the union delegate for his firehouse. So again, I understand how they have protections of their job related to his and to my father's was a lot about safety, making sure that people were being taken care of, making sure, like, after 9/11, that the firefighters were giving special masks, were giving change of clothes, because what was happening down then when they were working there was that they had to go home in the stuff that they were working in. So now they're bringing all of that home, and no one knew what was in there. So, having a voice for workers, being able to advocate for them and for their families is very important. As a state, when I worked for the New York State Parks, I was also in the union for CSEA. So I understand that unions are keeping the middle class together, but they've also helped build the middle class. And that's something that's very important that we need, especially here on Long Island, that it's very difficult to, live here, and that to have a strong union is very important.
We will talk to you after a short break.
Okay.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ The Way Forward. The Way Forward ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਹੰਟਿੰਗਟਨ ਟਾਊਨ ਕਾਉਂਸਲ ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਕੈਥਲੀਨ ਕਲੀਅਰੀ ਨਾਲ। So Kathleen, what do you consider the top 3 issues in this election?
I consider it to be the character of the town and zoning and density, so I'm going to put that as one. Also, it's taxes, and the other is water quality. I could also maybe put parking in the part of the density part too, so I'll try to shove as many as I can into your 3.
Yes, definitely. See, before we talk about anything else, something that raises concern. We have seen a lot of young people leaving the island.
Yes.
Or a lot of young people not moving to the island the way they were, raising families. That might be because of the expensive housing. That might be because of the high taxes, right? What do you think needs to be done in this regard?
One thing that I think has been done already, which I think was a good decision, is that the accessory apartment law was changed to allow a current homeowner, and previously they used to have to live in the main part of the house, and then they could rent out the apartment part. But what that led you to have is somebody who only needs 1 bedroom and maybe is elderly, doesn't need to live in this 5-bedroom part of the house. They would prefer to live in the apartment and then rent out the rest of it. Now, this is also under the same guidance of, the car situation and everything else. The rules, those still rules apply. But I think that is really a great solution, allowing more housing stock without building up and building on any of the empty lots that we have, the very few that we have. And that will also help with the market. So there'll be more places for people to live, more places for families to live, and that should also help with the prices, because obviously it's more that you put out on the market that should be lowering the prices of rent. I think that's a great solution, because then people also can stay in the town.
There was a time when towns like Huntington would be considered just commuter towns, like people working in city and living here. But now, with the vibrant business culture that we see developed around that 110 corridor,
right,
and local places, what do you think needs to be done to attract big and small businesses and talent in Huntington?
Well, I think that what we need to do as town of Huntington is be able to project and let people know that we're open for companies coming, because if we're being shown as somebody who's not open to new development or additional development or any changes, and if we don't show that we have a proper direction and an overall plan, then companies aren't going to want to come here. They're going to think that perhaps, we're not going to be as open or agreeable and work with them. But there are limits of what the town can do. So what we also need to be able to do is work with the county legislators and the state legislators also, because they have a bigger pull, and they also work across other areas, not just town of Huntington, but Babylon and Islip and such. So working together and having those relationships, which I do, starting running last year, I've made some great connections with our county legislators and our state senators and assembly people, and those are the things that I think working together with the town, county, and state is that makes us stronger, and we'll be able to bring more opportunity and money and incentives to companies to come here in Huntington.
And at the same time, the challenge is to maintain that character of the town, as you said,
yes,
which we feel a challenge with, huge developments, new apartments, lack of parking.
Yes.
And what do you think needs to be done in that regard?
I think we need to look at the town as an overall plan. A lot of what we hear about is in talking about sections. So the Centerport corridor, which is where the mill pond is, and then there's Jellyfish, and then there's the Water's Edge. If we talk about, if we were concentrating just on that, or concentrating on whether or not the 7-Eleven will go on the corner, whether or not Jellyfish will be turned to apartments, we're not talking about the 25A corridor as the way that most everyone, I live in East Northport, so the way that I get into Huntington and the way people travel, we're not looking at as overall comprehensive picture. We're looking at, right currently, it's just being looked at small one-offs, and that's incorrect. And that you take that one area of Huntington and bring it out to all of Huntington. You can talk about the 110 corridor. How is that affecting people, and where are they going to be living? Can they work and live at the 110 corridor? What should we be doing? Should we be doing any more in Huntington Village? Probably not. It seems that we're maxed out there. It's difficult to find parking. We're also redeveloping, but let's take the look at the town from the whole part, because I think what happens is people are only talking about one or two areas, the village, Centerport, and individual projects, and they're not looking at how are we going to do best for the entire town, because that's what's important.
But for a market like in Huntington Village, we do feel that the town needs to come up with some creative ideas to find some solutions. Right.
So so you're asking me how they should be developing now?
Do you see a role for the government there?
Yes, I do. I do see a road for there. I think that we need to be bringing more of the community into discussing what it is that they want. As I said, what I hear at the doors, two things, and it's interesting. One is Huntington Village is overdeveloped. We can't handle any more development. Oh, and my kids can't live here. How are they going to live here? Well, we have to talk about those two things, because if you're thinking that, if you're saying, and people have a right to that belief that Huntington's overdeveloped, but then if you want your kids to live here, where are they going to live? So why don't we get together and be creative in the ideas of what we can do and what people want to do? I mean, right now there's some talk about tinkering with some of the zoning changes, but that's not making anyone happy. And that has only been discussed within a certain part of the government, the town board. This hasn't been brought out to all of the town board, all the council people, and it also hasn't been discussed with the people who are against any new development or the builders. And everyone has, if we bring everyone together, we'll be getting better answers. If you're just going to segment and not let anyone give their opinion, then you're going to continue on a path without good input. And I think that's the problem, is that people in the government are not listening to the residents, and not everyone is just against things. People have creative ideas, and we should be going out to more people and broadening the base, and I think that we can do a lot of good there. And that should be the role of government, is to be able to go out, bring people in. We know the town council people shouldn't have all the answers, right? They shouldn't. They should be going out to experts. They should be going out to people who are living there, people who have ideas, and that we should be bringing that in, and let's all make make good decisions that way. And I've found that to work in private practice and business. The more people you have, you talk to the people who are actually doing the job, living it, they're going to have a different idea than somebody that's sitting outside of it and just looking overview.
That's what we might need. You have raised issues with cutting of budgets for the Maritime Department.
Yes, right. So the Maritime Department used to have many more people in it and has recently dismissed its full-time director. So we have many miles of coastline in town of Huntington. I'm sure that you've been up to the harbor. You know how many boats are up there, and we've noticed that we've had to put in. There's been some issues with accidents and such, not just in Huntington, but it can be. We need somebody to be overseeing and protecting our water and our safety in Huntington. And what we have now is a part-time person who doesn't have a background in maritime safety and who is working another full-time job not close to the town of Huntington and is expected to be managing all of this. We've been very lucky. We haven't had any accidents, but we're also not looking forward. And we're looking forward to making any additional changes. So we are saving money by having this part-time person, but really, what are we giving up?
But considering the kind of surroundings we have, I think that might be a very important issue for Long Island.
Yes, it is.
All right. Another thing I would like to talk to you about is, which concerns people on the whole of Long Island, Suffolk County, and in our town, is safety. There are some issues related with gang violence, drugs. How do you propose on handling those?
So our detectives in Huntington have really been great going out into the community and discussing issues with the people, and there have been a lot of groups that have been working in fostering communications between the residents and the town and the public safety officers and police officers. What I think, and what I've talked to some other people about, needs to be is looking over at some of the money that we've been getting from the state and town and federal, and maybe redistributing it around to other areas of people there are certain groups in the town that don't feel that they are being, their concerns are being as addressed as they should be. And that is part of a safety issue too, because you want to be able to have community be able to feel free to be able to come and make concerns, complaints, and then you also want your middle school teenager, I have a teenager, I know you need them to be able to be involved in the town and doing things. And sometimes, especially if parents are working, there's not places for them to go and be, having fun or getting to know other people. Maybe we can make some more, after school community events.
The biggest concern that concerns all Long Islanders is the taxes.
Yes.
And is there anything you're proposing to control those high property taxes?
So what I think needs to happen at the town of Huntington is that we need to have people who know how to manage departments, who have the background in, say, for example, on engineering. That person who's already managed an engineering department, who will be able to come in and create efficiencies. And that's something that I was responsible for and have seen working in a consulting company, is that you have someone come in, and not that the job wasn't being done properly before, but there's innovation, somebody has a new idea, you come in and look at it a different way, and then maybe they've already taken another department in another town and made efficiencies, and that's the way that we could be saving money for the taxpayers. Because if we can have things run smoothly and run better and do more without raising taxes, I think that would make the residents very happy.
Kathleen, I would like to ask you, what do you think are the issues with the South Asian community, which are a community of recent immigrants into this town?
So I've been going out to various areas and having meet and greets and visiting the religious communities. And what I've been hearing is that they love living in Huntington. They're really happy, as many of us are. But there are times that they don't feel that they have a voice on the town board, and that I've promised them that I will be that voice. I will be somebody that will listen to them for their concerns. And they want to be able to feel safe in bringing issues to me, or also becoming more involved. And that's a lot that I heard of too. During the summer, I have 2 interns that are great. They're now going back to graduate school, but their families were saying that, you know, they've been so successful in all their areas that they've done. They've had multiple degrees and they're very successful in their business, but they realize that they have not had a connection into the government, and that's important because to get their voice done. So what I've been doing, and I've been lucky to be able to do, is to be able to bring those kids and show them, this is what we do, this is how you run a campaign, this is how the town works, these are people that you need to know. And I'm very fortunate to have some very experienced women who have run multiple campaigns at the federal and state level, and also former elected officials who have sat down with them and we've talked about how you reach the community, how you talk to the community, and what various departments do. So yeah, so I think that's part of it too. It's really good. I think we need to have everyone to have a voice.
Definitely. Kathleen, I would like you to tell us in your own words, why should the voters pick you to lead this town?
Well, I did tell you about my background with contract management and stuff, and also the reason that I should be elected to the town council is because I consider myself a resident. I'm a resident first before I'm a politician. I've been living in the town for 21 years. I'm the only one that's running or would be on the board from the East Northport area. So that's an important area to also make sure that we have, you know, people looking out at each parts of the town of Huntington. And I am running to make sure that our government is working for us. I'm not running it because I have another business that I'm looking to. This will be my full-time job. I'll be totally dedicated to it and really passionate, and I think that I feel there's areas that I can fix, and that's why I think you should run.
I definitely think the town can use your experience.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you very much for speaking with us. Asan Tode, Huntington Town Council the candidate Kathleen Cleary. I hope ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ closely ਸੁਣੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਨਵੰਬਰ 5 ਨੂੰ ਹੈ। ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਬਾਹਰ ਆਓ, ਵੋਟ ਪਾਓ। Thanks for watching The Way Forward. The Way Forward ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਅਸੀਂ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜਾਣਿਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਇਨਕੁਆਇਰੀ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਟਰੰਪ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਉਹ ਹੁਣ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਕੋਰੈਸਪੋਂਡੈਂਟ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਜੈਗ ਰਾਜਪਾਲ ਜੀ ਤੋਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਇਨਕੁਆਇਰੀ ਕੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਕੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਕਿਸ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਟਰੰਪ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਇਨਕੁਆਇਰੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਜੈਗ ਜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ।
ਹਾਈ ਹਰਜੋਤ।
ਜੈਗ ਜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਕੁਝ ਇਨਕੁਆਇਰੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਬਟ ਇਟ ਵਾਜ਼ ਨਾਟ ਅ ਫਾਰਮਲ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਇਨਕੁਆਇਰੀ। क्या हुन एक फॉर्मल इंपीचमेंट प्रोसीडिंग शुरू कर दी गई है प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप के खिलाफ?
यस हरजोत, आई थिंक लास्ट टाइम ਅਸੀਂ ਕਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਾਫੀ 2-4 ਕਮੇਟੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੂੰ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਫॉर ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਸ।
ਜੀ,
ਟਰੰਪ ਦੇ ਟੈਕਸ ਰਿਟਰਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਟਰੰਪਸ ਇੰਟਰੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਵਿਦ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਐਂਡ ਆਲ ਦੈਟ, ਕਾਫੀ ਕੁਝ ਟੌਪਿਕਸ ਹਨ। ਉਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ। ਬਟ ਹੁਣੇ ਰੀਸੈਂਟਲੀ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸਲ ਬਲੋਅਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਹੋਰ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦ ਵਿਸਲ ਬਲੋਅਰ
ਜੀ,
ਬਟ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਕੰਪਲੇਂਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਟਰੰਪ ਇਨ ਅ ਕਾਲ ਵਿਦ ਦ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਮਿਊਨੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈਗੀ that violated a lot of principles of our constitution. ਉਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੰਪਲੇਂਟ ਸਰਫੇਸ ਹੋਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਐਂਡ ਉਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਫਾਰਮਲ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਹੁਣ ਨੈਂਸੀ ਪੈਲੋਸੀ ਨੇ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ। So now it's a formal start of an impeachment process with the US House of Representatives.
ਜੈਕ ਜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਥੋੜਾ ਹੋਰ ਦੱਸੋਗੇ? what is impeachment?
So ਜੋ impeachment ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ it's a process by which ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਨੂੰ ਹਟਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ। ਜੀ, ਸਪੈਸੀਫਿਕਲੀ ਸਪੀਕਿੰਗ ਹੁਣ ਇਨ ਦਿਸ ਮਾਹੌਲ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ there is a Article 1 and Article 2 of our Constitution lays out the procedure of how do you remove a federal official who's working.
जी.
For President, of course, he's the highest office holder of the country. So the Constitution specifically lays out कि यदि President ਨੂੰ यदि remove करना होए तो किस तरह की procedure होना चाहिए हैगा उस impeachment process ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ इते activate ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ इते Nancy Pelosi ने impeachment process ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ 2 step ਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਪਹਿਲੇ House of Representatives ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ impeach ਕਰੇਗਾ which is a kind of like a formal acquisition and if that House of Representatives with a simple majority or formally accused कर देंगे and with a simple majority vote ਤਾਂ ਜਾके impeachment दूसरे step पे पहुंचता हैगा which is to the Senate.
अच्छा तो the first step है कि इंक्वायरी होएगी फिर कुछ चार्जेस ड्राफ्ट किए जाएंगे हाउस उस दे ऊपर वोट पाएगा और अगर ये हाउस विच पास हो जाता है देन इट विल गो टू सेनेट इज इट राइट
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
so is the Senate legally bound to take that और जिस तरह से पहले देखिए है कई इश्यूज Senate ने किया है कि असी ये इशू चकेंगे ही नहीं तो are they legally required to address this issue?
Yes, so our Constitution is very clear. If the House does pass the impeachment proceedings with a majority, then the Senate has to take impeachment inquiry. ਜਿਹੜੀ Senate ਦੀ process ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ trial and conviction.
ਜੀ.
And once the case goes to Senate, the presiding officer of Senate usually ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ the vice president ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. But in this case, because the person being impeached is the president himself and vice president conflict of interest hunda hai because if the president gets impeached vice president becomes the president.
Ji.
So in that case if in this scenario when the Senate does the trial and conviction, Senate is presided by the Chief Justice of Supreme Court.
And I believe a jada particular case is there which the vice president might be implicated as well. Is that right?
Hanji, yes. So ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿੱਸਾ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ there's a call ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ with the Ukraine president Zelensky to congratulate him on his party's recent victory in the parliamentary system. ਉਸ call 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ there's a lot of back and forth, Trump is congratulating and etc. But during the call, there's some discussions came up about Joe Biden's son. ਉਹ topic ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਸ topic ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਿਸ ਵਰਗੇ ਉਹ topic ਉਠਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਕੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਸ topic ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ federal official ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ whistleblower ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੇ complaint ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ Trump ਨੇ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ it violates the Constitution, it's against the law and which is what the starting point of this impeachment is.
जो एलिगेशन सामने आ रही है ਉਹ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਨੂੰ US ਮਿਲਟਰੀ ਏਡ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਡਿਫੈਂਸ ਲਈ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੋਈ 400 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਦੀ ਏਡ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਵਿਦਹੋਲਡ ਕੀਤਾ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿ ਕੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਟ ਕਰੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਰਾਈਵਲਸ ਹਨ ਬਾਈਡਨ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬੇਟੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ Is that right? Is that what the allegation is?
Yeah, that's a kind of a high-level story that's being investigated. ਜਿਹੜੇ in fact ਅਜੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਰੀਕੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ clear ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ. This is what the impeachment process will do when they investigate and go into depth of details. But the sequence of allegations is yes ਕਿ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਟਾਈਮ 'ਚ ਮਿਲਟਰੀ ਏਡ ਵਿਥਹੋਲਡ ਕਰ ਲਿੱਤੀ ਸੀ ਐਂਡ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਥਹੋਲਡ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਐਂਡ ਦ ਇੰਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸ ਟੂ ਪੁੱਟ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਔਨ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਟੂ ਡੂ ਸਮ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨ although ਉਸ ਵਕਤ even his Republican ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਤੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੂੰ that he should not do this and he should release the military aid to Ukraine. ਤੇ ਉਹ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਆ ਕੇ ਟਰੰਪ released the aid. फिर ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਕਾਲ ਹੋਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਐਂਡ ਕਾਲ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਹੀ ਤੇ ਟਰੰਪ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ he brought up Biden again. So that again stirred the whole topic कि ਇਹ ਕਹਾਣੀ ਅਜੇ ਖਤਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਈ ਹੈਗੀ. Trump is pursuing to his political rival Biden and he is using all means to implicate him, or by implicating his son, indirectly implicating his potential rival in 2020 election.
And this is that July 25, 2019 call, right?
Yes. That was that call. There are a lot of flavors in that call. On the hand, Trump कहता है कि Trump is backing out. कि I have been just pressing on Ukraine to investigate into general corruption also. It was not just about Biden's, but if you look at a lot of the text messages and थोड़ी बहुत जो inquiry हुई है कि again we have to wait for the entire investigation. So the early investigation says that the government of US has never pressurized Ukraine so much to investigate corruption, even though President Trump can then he मैं उन्हें प्रेशराइज कर रहा थी. Now time only will tell कि सही गल कितनी हैगी झूठ कितनी हैगी. President also, if we all remember, President the campaign manager see 2016 Paul Manafort, he himself was involved in Ukraine and business activities, and he's been sentenced behind the bar. And Trump was actually very much defending Manafort even when he was convicted. ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਹਾਣੀ 'ਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੋੜ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹਨ ਤੇ that's what raises a lot of questions ਕਿ ਕੁਝ ਨਾ ਕੁਝ conflict of interest ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ.
Jack, the question that comes to mind is ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਐਂਡ ਲੈਟਸ ਸੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਕਰਪਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈਗੀ, देयर इज अ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਮੈਕੈਨਿਜ਼ਮ ਫॉर ਐਕਸਟਰਾ ਟੈਰੀਟੋਰੀਅਲ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਸ਼ਨਸ. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਮਬੈਸੀ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਊਂਟਰ ਪਾਰਟਸ ਹਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ. ਯੂ ਹੈਵ ਅ ਮੈਕੈਨਿਜ਼ਮ, ਯੂ ਹੈਵ CIA, ਯੂ ਹੈਵ FBI. ਕੋਈ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਟਰੰਪ went around all those things and डायरेक्टली अपने अटॉर्नी जनरल ਨੂੰ कहना या एक प्राइवेट अटॉर्नी ਨੂੰ इन्वॉल्व करना रूडी जुलियानी for a purpose like this? Does that look fishy, or how do you see that?
Yeah, so the optics of it looks very bad. In reality, we'll find out after the investigation. But the optics, why is the private attorney of Donald Trump or the president interacting with Ukraine? क्यों हो रहा हैगा? Maybe there was a reason behind that. Maybe he was hired by State Department, or maybe he was not hired by. Kahani, nobody knows. This is what the investigation is about. But few things which we know. Trump कहता है कि मैं anti-corruption campaign लाया है against the Ukraine government. But if you look at the expenditure of the State Department against Ukraine, one of the anti-corruption spending against Ukraine of US has been constant. कोई वजह नहीं हैगा.
अच्छा जी.
So some of these data does not tell us that साਡਾ focus थी कि corruption ਉੱਤੇ ਘੱਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈਗਾ.
ਤੇ ਇਹ impeachment ਜਿਹੜੀ inquiry ਹੈ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਕਿਸ stage ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੀ ਹੈ?
So at this stage there are almost 7 committees in the House which are investigating Donald Trump in various aspects. एक call लेके तो of course 2-4 topics और आ गए हैं, बड़े sensitive topics. But there's a House Judiciary Committee which is looking into obstruction of justice, House Intelligence Committee which is looking into this call, a House Oversight Committee which is looking into how he's conducting business on security clearances, Ways and Means is looking into tax returns of Donald Trump, which is an old investigation going on, House Financial Services, Transportation and Infrastructure, Foreign Affairs. So as such committees they are looking into various aspects. The only difference is that now there's a formal inquiry which has started. Again, after the findings of these committees, articles of impeachment will be drafted with true facts, and the committee the analysis hoegi, sat committees di, and then the Congress will have to vote on it. And a simple majority is required for Congress to impeach the president, which is a formal accusation कि एक काम गलत किया गया सी, so that Senate can take the next step.
ਤੇ ਜੈਕ ਜੀ US ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਪੀਚ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਐਂਡ ਹੈਜ਼ ਦੈਟ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟ ਐਵਰ ਬੀਨ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ?
So it's a good question. I mean, if you look at the history, there have been two presidents who have been actually formally been impeached. That means that Congress, the House of Representatives voted and it passed, by a simple majority. Pehle si President Andrew Jackson, who was impeached back in 1868, and the most recent history was President Bill Clinton. But in both cases,
ਜੈਕ ਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਲਾਂਗੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅੱਛਾ ਜੈਕ ਜੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦੋ ਇੰਸਟੈਂਸਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟਸ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਹੋਈ ਹਨ, ਐਂਡਰਿਊ ਜੈਕਸਨ ਐਂਡ ਬਿਲ ਕਲਿੰਟਨ। ਤੇ ਡਿਡ ਥੀਸ ਇੰਪੀਚਮੈਂਟਸ ਲੀਡ ਟੂ ਰਿਮੂਵਲ ਆਫ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਫਰੋਮ ਦ ਆਫਿਸ?
No. So again, it's a two-step process. The House has to pass with a simple majority, and then Senate has to pass. By the way, the threshold for Senate is slightly higher. Senate, when it actually convicts the president, they have to pass it by 2/3 majority. So bar is very high, unlike in the House in the first step. So both in Andrew Jackson's case and Bill Clinton's case, they were impeached by the House of Representatives, but Senate 2/3 majority nahi mil pai hai. Andrew Jackson, interestingly, Senate was just short of one vote in getting the 2/3 majority. But in case of Bill Clinton, they were far shy of 2/3 majority in convicting him. So both the presidents survived. The only president who ever stepped down was Nixon, but he stepped down before the start of impeachment process itself.
He resigned. Yeah, so it might be difficult in this case as well. ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਨੇਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਜੋਰਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਰਿਪਬਲਿਕਨ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਹੈ, who are still standing along with the president, right?
It's very right, and very interestingly, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already started raising funds. He's doing fundraising to squash this impeachment process. So, you can see how polarized we are, and Senate is working on a very different way. They, we'll see. Time only will tell.
Yeah.
See on that.
And we don't know कि ये इंक्वायरी किथे लीड कर दी है, की पता चलता है। I understand कि आज एक और whistle blower सामने आए and who is claiming direct knowledge of what has happened, but only time will tell ki what is the truth in all this.
So it's interesting you bring that, Harjot, with this whistleblower, there is some allegations say that the Inspector General of Intelligence Committee, they probably changed the guidelines of whistleblower, how they file a complaint. So that itself is a red flag. Somebody has to investigate. When the first whistleblower came, it's alleged that he had started talking to the Senate House Intelligence Committee already before filing the complaint. So there are a lot of allegations on both sides, so we don't know the real truth, and time will tell us.
ਰਾਜ ਜੀ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸਲੇ 2020 ਦੀ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੈਟਿਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਪਿਆ ਹੈ ਆਪਣਾ ਨੋਮੀਨੀ ਚੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ? ਵੀ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਿ ਬਰਨੀ ਸੈਂਡਰਸ ਹੈਜ਼ ਸਫਰਡ ਅ ਹਾਰਟ ਅਟੈਕ ਲਾਸਟ ਵੀਕ.
Yes, Jot, this age of Bernie Sanders was always a concern. He's right now 78, so should he win, and should he become a president, and by the time he takes oath, he'll be 80 years old. So that was always a concern. He suffered a heart attack. He was hospitalized, and he was released yesterday. He says that he is in good health, but definitely I think it's a little bit setback to his campaign because the question always comes, sent in front of he main candidate of the health kis tarah haegi. So that's we'll see how polling how he fares going ahead. He had already started dropping a little bit the last couple of days ever since he had a heart attack. But interestingly, Elizabeth Warren is rising a lot in the last couple of weeks, especially after the last debate. As we know, Iowa is the first caucus on February 3rd, and the most recent poll tells us that Warren is number one in polling in Iowa.
Yeah, and I think with this health issue with Bernie Sanders and Biden's name being dragged into this investigation and everything, it might work in favor of Elizabeth Warren.
Very well said, Harjot. Sanders' loss is Warren's gain because the demographics which supports is the same.
Gee.
So obviously, I think that's a factor which will help and continue to help Warren in this. And Biden being dragged into this controversy, it's a double-edged sword. One thinking is that it sort of brings him back to the limelight. Sometimes they say that bad publicity is also a good is the publicity. So ho sakta hai isnu us karke help hi mile, depends on how he plays his cards, but we'll see.
And the latest on Bernie Sanders is that he has suspended TV ads in Iowa. That is a surprising move.
Yes, that's a surprising move. So it's quite puzzling as to what his strategy is, and all these happened very recently. So we don't know what exactly is going in his mind, his strategy. It's the first caucus, and he has slipped in polls. He used to be in 18-20%, but now he's slipped to 12% in Iowa. So maybe that has something to do with that. Maybe he's giving up on Iowa. We don't know.
And when is the next debate?
So next debate is on 15th of October in Ohio, and there are 12 candidates who have qualified for it already. Jede last debate che 10 candidates thi hote hain hi hain. Plus we have now Tom Sawyer and Tulsi Gabbard. Very interestingly, she has qualified back again for this debate.
And who would you call the front runners at this stage? I understand Pete Buttigieg. How is his campaign going on?
So Pete, if you look at the top five in the Democratic primary, it's Biden, Warren, Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and Harris. So very interestingly, since the last debate, Pete Buttigieg has risen in the polls, and more surprisingly, or I shouldn't say more surprisingly, Harris has fallen down in the polls. Nationally also, and very surprisingly, she has started to lag in polls in her home state of California, which is a little bit a setback to her, and it's a little bit surprise to many people.
Didn't she make some immediate gains after attacking Vice President Biden?
Yes, in the very first debate, if you remember, I think she was very feisty against Biden, and I think she gained momentarily after that. Some people say that, if Biden loses because of this impeachment process chal raha hai with Donald Trump, then Biden's loss would be Harris's gain. But, she has had many false starts, but she has yet to catch a fire, which is what concerns and probably bothering her. She's kind of rebooting her campaign also. She has put her, boots in ground in the southern states, most recently trying to gather some momentum and get some Black African American community votes back and momentum from that aspect of the demographics. But I think she's trying to shake her campaign up and get back into action.
Asi is debate process te or is nomination process te apni निगाह बड़ी closely रखी है तोड़े तक असी वो news लेके आंदे रहेंगे जैग जी साडे नाल गल करन दा तोड़ा बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. You said the next debate is October 15th?
Yes, Harjot, yes.
ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਦਾ detailed analysis ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਗੇ with Mr. JAG RAJPAL. The way forward ਦੇਖਣ ਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ The Way Forward.